Greensboro, North Carolina. As has often been the case with other African American singers, she had her first exposure to Negro spirituals and German hymns in her home church. She received her bachelor's degree in music education from Bennett College and her master's degree in vocal performance from Florida State University, and has continued her studies at the University of Iowa. While at Florida State, Randye expanded her musical interests to include both music research, especially related to vocal music by African American musicians, and music librarianship. She began the career of music cataloger at the university, followed by additional library work at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And for the past 14 years, we have benefited here in her role as music collection coordinator for the libraries. As a researcher, Randye Jones has been a pioneer in producing websites featuring the research of African American vocalists. She created the website Afrocentric Voices in Classical Music, which launched in 1998. More recently, Jones instigated the Spirituals Database, a site with information on over 5,000 concert spiritual recording tracks. She has also published several online articles, including The Gospel Truth about the Negro spiritual, and written 2 essays for the Library of Congress's National Recording Registry. Randye's first book, which you see here, So You Want to Sing Spirituals, was just published in October by Roman and Littlefield. It is part of a series sponsored by the National Association of Teachers of Singing. Let us welcome Randye as we learn.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Sweet chariot, aren't terribly surprised to hear or see me singing, except in a library, of course, but just generally, it's not that big a surprise. What I'm advocating, not only as far as my own lecturing, writing, and so forth, is that the Negro spiritual is an American music. It's a world music that needs to be explored and disseminated and enjoyed. And that the race of the performer means nothing. You either can sing these pieces or you can't. And it really comes down to an issue of your commitment to performing the works. I hope you had a chance to read at least part of James Weldon Johnson's comments. And notice this is back in 1925. They were already at that point advocating this. Now, one of the things I tried to understand was what had happened. Because in actuality, when H.T. Burleigh wrote Deep River back in 1916, and then with a couple of later editions, these works were actually recorded by white singers. African Americans at that point could not even get recordings made unless they were willing to pay for them themselves, out of pocket. So Burleigh and composers like him really depended on white singers to get those songs out. I'm not really sure, I still haven't quite understood what happened that this changed so dramatically over the years, but it did. But it just really depended on, in this case of this gentleman y'all are really going to get a chance, I think, to hear some dynamic performances. This gentleman's name is Oscar Siegel. He was basically one of the earliest recorders of Negro spirituals. And I thought, I wanted you to be able to hear what someone who knows this. And this is going to be one of the few times I actually read something, because I find I get bored listening to me read, so I'm not going to bore you myself. But I wanted to share just a quote that he stated, or that was stated about him. Oscar Siegel, he knew the oral tradition, performance tradition from personal experience from the South. He was a native of Tennessee, and he often traveled with his lay preacher father on his preaching circuits in the mountains. He heard the singing and preaching at revival services in congregations where spirituals often broke out spontaneously during the sermon. His familiarity with the oral tradition prepared him to sing the spirituals with greater understanding than most white performers, but he attributed the success of his performances to Burleigh's arrangements. So now, just to give you a little sense, I'm going to try as best I can to let y'all hear the entire, okay. I'm not sure why this is popped in. Yeah, I need to get that menu clear out. Just trying to get the menu to disappear. Thank you. as you can hear, he takes full advantage of the things that his knowledge of singing spirituals, the emotional commitment to the music. And even though there's not any very clearly distinct use of dialect, he does soften some of the final consonants, and there are some not just straight singing of standard English. Now, I will also want to just explain, I guess, some thoughts about why some people have felt like, am I, as a white person or a non-African American, allowed to sing spirituals? Do I have permission to sing spirituals? There is a history here. There are things that have happened, especially the concern about people taking these spirituals and using them in ways that put African Americans down, especially use of minstrelsy. And so, there are situations like this. For example, where we've also had even questions about, could African Americans have the intellect to even create spirituals? And so, yes, there is concern when a person stands up who is not African American and they start singing. The first thing is this person going to sing spirituals? Oh, okay, this ought to be interesting. But I also am a firm believer that if a person has put the effort in preparation of that music, same attention that they would put into the singing of German songs or French melody or whatever, if they've studied the music, they've studied the score, tried to find out what the composer's intent is, made decisions about the interpretive issues that are faced by the song, and they stand up and most of all put themselves into the performance of that song, they will have that audience. It won't be a question of this person is white, this person is black, this person can sing the spiritual, or this person can't. Now, cultural perceptions. Believe it or not, there is a discussion, and it's still ongoing, about is there such a thing as a black voice? And do you have to have it to sing spirituals? From a physiological standpoint, there's really been no discernible proof that says that a person of African descent has a different vocal structure than one who isn't. But I do think that there are some cultural things, some connections that can be made, that if you've grown up in an environment where you hear spirituals, where you're exposed to the history of those songs, if you understand where these songs came from, there are certainly advantages that you gain. I am from the South. I was originally born in North Carolina, as you heard from my bio, and I've heard spirituals my whole life. I know those songs. This is an advantage. Now, as to whether or not I have the black voice or not, that's something that I cannot tell you. Your ear tells you what you hear. And which I thought was an interesting concept as I was doing my research. What is it that, it's not really so much the voice, but maybe what your ear is picking up from the singer. And I would like to, I'm going to go back and look at that book a little more closely and see what the arguments of that the author presented. But I think it is an interesting concept. Are there cultural instances, things that you pick up, ways that you speak, not necessarily, or that you sing, that you pick up from hearing other people in your community or recordings and so forth, that you pick up and that you maybe adapt to? I don't know. I think it's an interesting argument that one could present as to whether or not it's a voice that can be taught. Of course, I do also understand that there is a practical consideration. You know, if you're in a program, you've got a certain amount of funds and a certain amount of time in which to prepare your students, to get them ready to say that I have completed my degree, I am a classically trained singer, my choir has a certain amount of music he's got to learn in a certain amount of time. I understand all of those things, and I think that this is something that needs to be intentional. That, you know, you're not just relying upon Western European music to create a program. If there is an intentional effort to look at resources that are available, that you offer scholarships to students who are interested in studying, that you bring in musicians who perform music outside of the Western European tradition, and not just in Black History Month. You know, if you send your instructors out to take classes, if you look at your course materials and you say, what things can I do in addition to the standard material that I can bring in and introduce to my students? Because one of the things I guess I discovered as a singer and as an academic was that a lot of the things I learned I had to teach myself. I had one voice teacher of all of the teachers I've studied with over the years who knew anything about spirituals. I taught them. And I was glad to do it because then they were able to teach their students. But the thing is that in my graduate study, my vocal literature class, we had one session where they talked about spirituals. And that was because the two of us, the two African Americans who were in class, went to the instructor and said, can you teach a section talking about this? And let's just say that it was a horror story. What she did. I'm not going to go into that because that's not part of my presentation. But there was no intentional effort to offer this material to students. So of course, when they became teachers, they didn't have the background in which to offer that to their students. So yes, I do believe there needs to be an overt effort to look at resources. Your libraries, you know, that's another opportunity to provide the resources that the students need to be able to use those. I can assure you, as an undergraduate student, I'm going to go and I'm going to grab off the shelf what's already available because I got to have something to sing. I am not going to write to somebody and ask them, do you have whatever? I don't have the time. I think that we have been very fortunate here in that this library has been extremely supportive. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and mention it now because I don't want to forget it. We have been acquiring a number of things in this subject, and the library was very kind to put up a nice display of some of those materials. And I guess we call it still the reference area.
Basically.
Yeah. And so you can get a sense of what's there, and those items are available to check out, so please, you know, feel free to use them. But the thing is to take an intentional approach. Now, one of the things I wanted to do too was to just talk about, I mean, if you decide you want to sing spirituals, there are some questions that you might have. Can I sing in dialect? This is a serious question and certainly worthy of asking, because there are people who, and it doesn't matter whether you're Black or white, to be honest with you, there's some people who have some concerns about the singing in dialect. Some people have this really curious thought that if you sing in dialect, you're somehow giving the impression that you don't have the educational heft to be able to not sing in dialect. That's an unfortunate thought, because the idea is to use the elements of the musical style that you were singing. If I'm singing German songs, I want to be able to sound as close to a native German person singing as I can. I'm not saying I would do it, but I'm doing the very best I can. And if I'm singing Negro spirituals, to me, to allow myself to not take advantage of an element that so strongly impacts the effectiveness of singing that song by not singing in dialect, it is putting myself at a disadvantage. And it's also not allowing the audience a chance to hear that music in at least somewhere close to its original form. And so certainly I would encourage one to contemplate using dialect. Now, dialect is also something that you can't just jump into quickly. It takes time to learn it. And one of the things I found, as I said, I'm from the South. My voice teacher had the curious thing of having to teach me what diphthongs and triphthongs were, because as a Southerner, I didn't use them. And I didn't really hear them. Not so much that I didn't use them, but I didn't really hear them to be able to tell the first vowel and consonant, first and second vowel sounds in I. So I had to learn what I was listening to. Someone else on the other end, they had to learn to sing without that second vowel sound, or certainly a lighter use of it. So I instead of I. And, or instead of saying the, or instead of Lord, lo, or some combination there. And one of the other things too about diction, dialect, is that it's a regional thing. You could go from one plantation to another and hear a different sound. So some words that might apply one place might be pronounced totally differently elsewhere. And then you got the other element of being able to sing it in a vocally, technically correct manner. And that was one of the challenges I had, was that when I sing, I was taught to sing with the sound projecting from the front of my head, what they call the mask. However, when I sang spirituals as a child, I sang and spoke from the back of my mouth, back of my throat. And so I had to coordinate that and learn how to sing technically correctly and still sing in dialect. So that even though I did not have the challenge of being able to use dialect, I still had to learn how to use it correctly. So it's not, that was still years of study that was necessary for me to be able to match the two together and to sing them effectively. Now, what I would suggest to someone who is not used to singing dialect, very simply, is to start with a song that didn't have any dialect in it. There are Negro spirituals out there. Deep River, for one, that is a gorgeous piece. There's not a word of dialect in it. You, as a singer, make decisions sometimes. You look at the composer's work, and I think I've jumped in. Oh, no, I'm still pretty much where I need to be. You look at the composer's work, and you make a decision about sometimes this word that they have suggested is perfect. Sometimes you're going to have to make some adjustments. And those are individual choices. And it's something that you're going to have to develop over time. What works best for you, what enunciations work correctly best for you, and honestly, what's going on in the song. Sometimes it's depending on the note you're singing. If you're singing a very high note, on Deep River, that goes up to a high A, and you're singing the word promised. On the word pra. Now, if you're going to sing that in dialect, you need to do one thing. If you're not going to sing in dialect, you're doing something totally different vocally. So those are the kind of considerations you have to keep in mind. I suspect by now you're tired of hearing me talking, and I'm going to let you do a little listening this time. But what I want you to listen to, the gentleman here, Robert McGimsey, was from Louisiana, so he grew up on a plantation, knew Negro spirituals, and much of what he did, he transcribed a lot of music, but he also was a composer. And the song that I'm going to play next is called Sweet Little Jesus Boy. A lot of people have no idea that this is not a Negro spiritual. This is a song that was written in the style of a Negro spiritual. The singer is a baritone named Robert Merrill. And I just want you to listen to see if you can hear whether or not he's singing in dialect. Did you say that you heard dialect here?
Once in a while, I thought I heard a little more southern accent, but it wasn't consistent.
I actually heard quite a bit. Because to me, it's not just a matter of, there's, as I said, some of the softening of final consonants. Massa. Massa, you done showed us how. We is a triumph. So I did hear it, but the thing that with Robert McGimsey did something kind of strange. It would have, I'm not sure whether he wrote it this way or whether that was the way the publisher handled it. There's standard English in the vocal line, and then under the text is there are some places where there are dialect suggestions. And what the gentleman there was a gentleman who came in around later and republished his transcripts And he said, in actuality, that song is backwards. It was, Majimsi's idea was you sing in dialect and the English, standard English is there to translate for you, so if you don't know what that word is, you can, but there was never any intention that you sing this song completely in standard English. The other thing I wanted to point out, you notice that in this case he was singing to an orchestra. Unfortunately, the downside of doing that, he still did a wonderful job, and I actually like this piece a lot, is that of course you cannot, people had to know exactly what you're going to do. There's not a lot of space for improvisation. And so when you've got a collaboration with a pianist or an instrumentalist who can follow what you're going to do, even if you only give them 3 or 4 variations on the thing. As many times as I've sung this piece, I don't think I've ever sung it exactly the same way 2 times in a row. Because I know, but I can only do that, and I actually only give this piece to somebody who can play it and follow me wherever I take them. Because honestly, I don't know where I'm going to go sometimes. It's just, one of the things I really love about this song is that he did give you the option. I don't know if you've noticed, even with the orchestra, there's not a lot going on in the instrumental line. So you have a lot of freedom as the singer to be able to interpret which word do you want to focus on at that moment. Which words do you just want to get through pretty quickly for one reason or another? You done told us how. Or you done told us how. Sing 2 different ways and same words, same notes, but it gave me the chance as a singer to be able to take that where I wanted to go at that moment. Unfortunately, when you're singing against the orchestra, you gotta have a pretty good sense of what needs to happen. And but that's still a gorgeous piece. I am hoping that I'm going to play this all the way through, because even though it's long, what Marilyn Home does to this song is, especially at the end, it's just, you got to hear it. Can everybody hear okay? I'm sorry, I'm jealous. Always wanted to be a mezzo, but she just, you know. I would love to see the music score to that because I'd like to see how much improvisation. There's some of it's very obvious, like the very end, but I'd really like to see how much she does in that piece. The last song I'm going to play is actually Chanticleer. I have one of their CDs. They've actually done a bit of recording of spirituals. And they're Where the Sun Will Never Go Down, something like that. I have had to purchase 2 different copies of that because I've worn them out. But this one, I just thought would really be nice. Before I play it for you, though, I wanted to read this. This is going to be the last thing I read to you. It's a comment that was made by a musicologist named Natalie Curtis Berlin. She was one of the earliest, really, people who did serious research of Negro spirituals. And I thought that her explanation about enunciation of dialect really seemed to bring everything into one statement. In trying to sing Negro dialect, white people should bear in mind that it's primarily a legato form of speech. The African languages of Bantu stock, from which great linguistic family came, probably most of our African Negroes, are soft and musical in spite of the clicks in some of them, so that the transplanted Negro instinctively modified harsher sounds in English, sliding words together and leaving out whole syllables. TH being a difficult sound for most people not born to it, becomes D to the black man. But the vowels that follow should be pronounced as the white man pronounces them. For instance, the, commonly spoken the, is called by the Negro da, or not D, although depends. This should especially be borne in mind by white singers. I think there's a lot that can be, there's a lot of research out there about the use of dialect, about improvisation. I would just say as far as improvisation is concerned, know the composer, who that person is. Hall Johnson, you really aren't supposed to improvise his stuff. That's the general understanding, but I do it. You know. But I've been singing for a while, and it's taken me a while to feel comfortable about doing it. And I feel like if I want to sing Witness, which is written by Hall Johnson as, "Oh Lord, the matter of man is this, all nations in him are blessed, all things are done by his will. He spoke to the sea and the sea stood still." If I want to swing it and sing it, "Oh Lord, what manner of man is this? All nations in him are blessed. All things are done by his will. He spoke to the sea and the sea stood still." If I want to do that, I'll go to the World Authority on Hall Johnson, and I'll say, "That's another what I decided to do." But I also know if I go to competition and I sing it that way, I'm going to get booed off the stage because I'm not singing Hall Johnson anymore. I'm singing Randye Jones' version of Hall Johnson. So you have to know, you really have to know what you're doing with the piece, what the composer's intent was. And, you know, and if you can make the piece work stylistically. Now, please don't sing, even I would sing Hall Johnson like hip hop or, you know, it just, the style, I mean, at least swinging did exist during Hall Johnson's life. He knew what it was. He might not have written for it, per se. He may have. I haven't had a chance to study all of his music. But I do know that stylistically it was part of his era. but I want you to hear this. This is Chanticleer. And in case you thought that somehow you were going to get out of here without doing what I usually have folks do when they come to hear me speak, you get to sing. Audience participation time. This is, of course, every time I feel the spirit, you'll notice there's a couple of words already written in dialect that you are welcome to sing or not sing. I hope you will contemplate it. Now, can I get somebody who would be willing, oops, we never do my thing. Oh. Okay, that want to take the solo parts? First verse, second verse? I'll take one, and somebody else will volunteer for the other. No? Oh, come on, I know there are voices out there. Okay, because if you leave it up to me, I might start singing too high and I'll be singing alone. So I'll try to start it slow. I'll try to sing it slow. And if it's songs you're not terribly familiar with, that's one of the nice things about spirituals is that it was a community song, music. The idea was a lot of times they were completely created contemporaneously. People, there was something on it, they heard something, they might have heard him, that they decided they could make work a little better for them. Yeah. Or they may have just something completely out of the blue. And so there was the usual idea, and since of course we were talking about an oral tradition, you start singing the song gets changed around, the congregation changes it, and I'm calling it congregation for want of a better term. But the thing is that the song develops as it's created. And so, if you don't know the song, we're going to sing the same chorus 3 times. So hopefully by the time we get to that point, you can all join in with it. And if it's too high, just say Randy, but by then it'll be too late because I'm already gone. Okay. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Upon the mountain, my Lord spoke. Out of his mouth came fire and smoke. Looked all around me, looked so fine, till I asked my Lord if all was mine. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Jordan River, chilly and cold, chills the body, but not the soul. Ain't but one train on this track, runs to heaven and then right back. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. Okay, all right. Well, it is getting close to that time, and and I know I should allow some time for questions. So I'm just going to very quickly mention again the display is back in that direction, and I hope you take a moment or so to just take a look. The student who organized it did a wonderful job, and it really has some interesting materials, both sound recordings and music scores. And I put a listing of those pieces that, that's a copy of the book. There's a lot, it's really, I think, an effort to just try to bring into one book the resources that are available to a singer or a teacher or other musician who wants to begin studying Negro spirituals. And so, and that's just a listing of the songs you got to hear today. And then that's a listing of the items that are on display. Questions?
the term arrangement versus setting? Like I noticed that, oh, I'm sorry. I had a question about the term on the PowerPoint where you said, setting by particular person as opposed to like arrangement.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
To be honest with you, I hate using the term arrangement because to me if you know the definition, the ASCAP, the Association of Authors, Composers, or whatever, arranger is really somebody who took a song and basically made some changes, minor changes to it, and then set it out there. To me, a composer who uses a spiritual to create a new work is a composer. They're not an arranger. And so, if you look at my book, you will not see the word arranger. And I use settings because, to me, I want to acknowledge the original creators of those spirituals. And so, that's just the best word I've found so far. I don't know, maybe there'll be a day that I'll find the perfect word that's different than setting, but definitely gives credit to the composer, the creator of that composition. And yet it also does acknowledge the originators of the spirituals.
Thank you.
Other? Oh, one other thing I do also want to mention, in addition to the book, I don't know what I mentioned, this is actually my first book. And long story about how I got to it, and I'm not going to try to get into that, but the point was, because it was my first book, I had no idea how many pages I could give them, and I submitted a lot of stuff. And they told me I gave them 50% more material than they needed for the book. So what I ended up doing was that all of the appendices, which include stuff on, which anthologies have Negro spirituals in them. There are people who know about the anthologies that are all spirituals, but I don't think a lot of them know that there are actually collections out there of songs that include spirituals, but that may not be their primary focus. And so that was one of the things I tried to do, was to put together different listings of choral music that has the Negro spirituals included, solo vocal, art songs that are not spirituals. And of course you can get into the whole debate about whether concert spirituals are or are not art songs, but that's a different debate, and I'm sure you couldn't care less. But the thing is that there was a chapter that was included in this book on art songs that are not spirituals that were written by African American composers, so that material was included as well. I would just say, so that all of that stuff is online. It's actually free to access. And I put the link is available. All you got to do is do a quick search for it. So you want to sing spirituals. You're welcome to use it. I hope that it will be helpful to singers and teachers who are trying to find repertoire. And that was the purpose of that material. So anyway, yes.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed your talk and singing. I'm curious, I'm not sure how to phrase my question, but like the Wade in the Water was a song that I remember we were taught, and when I was in chorus in middle school, like we sang that. And also considering the quotation that you had at the beginning of your talk, we sang it with our chorus class, but we didn't have all the background and stuff like that. So I'm not quite sure how to sort of think about that now, and like how to process sort of what that meant. I'm not sure if I'm explaining myself very well.
I think you're explaining yourself very well. Thank you. I'm thankful you had the experience, whatever it was. Because there are a lot of kids who will never have an idea of what a spiritual is, and that's their loss. So I would simply say, I've gone into churches where I've seen spirituals in hymnals, And, it's very straight hymn type, and yeah, I must admit, I sort of get a little creative while the congregation is singing, and hope that they don't get too thrown off by it. But, the thing is, though, the song itself is the power of the song, however it might be rendered. But I think that if you understand that, yes, this is a hymn version of that spiritual, there are people who, I can very honestly, will get into a rip-roaring fit because I'm singing them as concert spirituals. There are people who sing them as popular music. In fact, she's already left. Sharon Clayton, who is the administrative assistant here, was playing Tom Jones's arrangement of Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child for me. It would, as you can imagine, Tom Jones style. But it sounded wonderful, actually. And so, this was in a popular, 70s, 80s sort of pop sort of style, but he made it work. And so it's not so much the fact that you sang in your choir, you got a chance to sing spiritual, and you got a chance to expose yourself, to be exposed to that music. I would just simply say, take that on, and if there are other songs that you really enjoy, please do so. That's the way that people get to become aware of that music and to have opportunities to learn the different ways that it can be performed in an honest intent to sing it as it was originally intended. Now we'll say conversely, as I said, minstrelsy and so forth, where people went out of their way to create derogatory or to misappropriate the songs. There's a story in the 2018 New York Times about how a soccer team in England sings Swing Low Sweet Chariot as basically a fight song. Yeah. That was my reaction.
Wow.
That was the nicest thing I could. You took that. I went in a totally different direction with that. So I would say I applaud the fact that you had that opportunity to sing it, and I hope you got something from it, from that experience.
Definitely. I mean, that's the only song I can actually remember from that. I mean, it was pretty powerful. So yeah.
So no, please don't think there was anything wrong or somehow lesser than, I've been studying spirituals for a while, and, so if I hadn't had that opportunity as a child to sing it in my home church, I would have had that loss, maybe not even as much as you, the exposure you had to it. So,
Thank you.
any other questions, comments? Anybody want to get up and sing? Okay, well, thank you all so much